Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're the podcast where we basically take a whole pile of sources, articles, research, detailed notes, lectures, and we pull out the absolute key insights for you.
Giving you that shortcut, really, to being genuinely well-informed on complex topics.
Exactly. And today, wow, we're diving into something that really challenges how we think about, well, everything. Predictability, risk. It's the concept of the black swan.
Ah, the black swan. It's such a powerful idea.
It really is. And the origin of the name itself is fascinating. Just imagine, for centuries, everyone in the old world, absolutely everyone, knew that all swans were white.
It wasn't just an assumption, right? It was based on countless observations, generations seeing only white swans. It was just,
Fact. Totally.
yeah.
Embedded in culture and science.
Right.
Then explorers head off to Australia, and guess what they find?
A black swan.
A black swan. Just one sighting, but it completely shatters that centuries-old truth. It wasn't just adding a new type of swan. It fundamentally overturned what they thought was universally known.
And that perfectly illustrates the core idea, that one unexpected piece of data can invalidate lifetimes of confirmation.
Precisely. So that's our launchpad for this deep dive. We're exploring this concept of black swans, these events that are way outside the norm, the truly unexpected.
And our mission here is to really dig into a whole range of sources, including a pretty detailed digital lecture on this, to pull out those critical insights.
Yeah, we want to give you that shortcut, like we said, to understanding these events that seem to come out of nowhere but end up shaping everything.
It's about understanding why we failed to see them coming, the flaws in the tools we use.
Right, the models and things.
Exactly. And importantly, maybe finding some practical ways to, well, navigate a world that's inherently uncertain.
It's about learning to look beyond the obvious, maybe accept what we don't know, and figure out how to stay standing when the unexpected hits. So let's get into it.
That black swan metaphor, it's so apt because it captures that feeling of something being completely out of syllabus, as the sources put it.
Out of syllabus. I like that. It's beyond what you were prepared for.
Totally. That discovery in Australia wasn't just adding a footnote, it was rewriting the textbook. It shows how a single observation can just demolish centuries of certainty. That's the essence of a black swan event.
So it's not just about rarity then, it's something more fundamental.
Exactly. Rarity is the first key characteristic the sources identify, yes. A black swan is an outlier. It falls so far outside our regular expectations because, well, nothing in our past experience really pointed towards it being possible.
It wasn't just unlikely, it felt impossible, or at least unthinkable within the usual framework.
Precisely.
Yeah.
We literally have no box to put it in beforehand. But the second characteristic is its extreme impact.
Okay, so not just a blip.
Not at all. Think massive consequences, events that genuinely change the course of history or completely reshape an industry or, turn an individual's life upside down. It's the tsunami, not the ripple.
Gotcha. So outlier status, extreme impact. What's the third?
This one's maybe the most interesting and kind of insidious retrospective explainability.
Ah, the Monday morning quarterbacking.
Exactly. After the black swan event happens, everyone suddenly seems to understand why it occurred. Explanations are constructed, narratives are built.
Making it seem like it was predictable all along, if only we'd looked closer.
Right. But that's just our brain trying to make sense of the chaos after the fact. It's a coping mechanism. But it's dangerous because it makes us think we can predict these things next time.
Which leads to overconfidence, yeah. We don't learn the real lesson about unpredictability.
Precisely. We rationalize away the randomness, the sheer unexpectedness of it. And the sources really stress that these black swans, these are the events that truly drive history, business, science.
The real turning points.
Yes, the big non-linear shifts, not the small incremental stuff we usually focus on.
And when you start looking through history with this lens, you see them everywhere, don't you? The sources point to things like World War I starting in 1914.
A classic example. Nobody in 1913 was genuinely predicting a global war of that scale erupting from, an assassination in Sarajevo. The event itself wasn't totally out of left field, but the consequences, the scale, that was the black swan.
Or the rise of Hitler, the collapse of the Soviet Union. These weren't slow, predictable trends reaching a conclusion. They felt like sudden shocks to the system.
Absolutely. The speed and totality of the USSR's collapse, for instance, caught nearly everyone off guard. Geopolitical experts were largely blindsided. It wasn't just the event, but the way it happened.
And it applies beyond history, too, right? Like technology.
Oh, definitely. Think about the internet. Who really predicted its pervasive impact back in, say, the early 80s? Or even personal events, a sudden illness, an unexpected inheritance, meeting a key person. These can be personal black swans.
The sources really hammer home that you don't grasp these by just following the daily news cycle, do you?
No, because the news focuses on the predictable, the incremental. We get obsessed with, tiny fluctuations in the stock market or minor political squabbles.
While missing the giant landscape-altering things brewing beneath the surface.
Exactly. The core logic, really, is that what we don't know is often vastly more significant than what we do know. The real breakthroughs, the game changers in any field, they come from those out-of-syllabuses ideas.
Until it becomes common knowledge, it's invisible.
Right. And that's where the real power lies. Understanding this helps you see why things like, say, a massive earthquake or a terrorist attack have such a disproportionate impact.
Because they fundamentally break our expectations of normality.
Precisely. It's the unexpected nature that causes the most damage, the most disruption. What we know, what we plan for, that rarely causes the big systemic problems. It's the unknown unknowns, the true black swans, that pose the real challenge.
Okay, so these events exist, they're powerful, but why are we so bad at seeing them? What does this tell us about ourselves?
Well, the sources suggest the origin of this whole line of thinking is deeply personal for the author, Nassim Taleb. It's rooted in his experiences growing up in Lebanon.
Which was seen as this, stable, multicultural place,
Yeah.
right?
Exactly. A perceived paradise of peace. Sophisticated, diverse. And then, seemingly out of nowhere, it erupts into this incredibly brutal, long-lasting civil war.
That must have been a profound shock.
Absolutely. He talks about how that experience completely shattered any illusion of stability or predictable equilibrium. If a society like that could just disintegrate so rapidly.
What does that say about our ability to really understand the world, anywhere?
Precisely. It led him to see history as fundamentally opaque. We see the outcomes, the end results, but the actual process. It's messy, chaotic, and we tend to selectively remember it to fit a neat story afterwards.
We impose order on the past.
We do. And this experience seems to underpin the whole framework. It led to identifying these core problems in how we think we understand things.
Okay, what are those problems? The sources mentioned 3 key ones.
Yes. First, there's the illusion of understanding. We genuinely believe we grasp how the complex world works, but reality is just infinitely more intricate than our minds can really model.
We simplify things too much, like using mental shortcuts.
Exactly. We create categories, we platonify, we impose these neat, ideal forms onto messy reality. We think our models capture it, but they're just crude maps. And even when unexpected things happen daily, people resist admitting their predictions were wrong.
They rationalize it away. Oh, I was almost right.
Right. We confuse the map with the territory. The second problem is that retrospective distortion we touched on earlier.
Hindsight bias.
Yeah.
Everything makes perfect sense looking back.
Annoyingly perfect sense, yeah. But in the moment, when things are actually unfolding, it's all confusion and uncertainty. The author mentions reading a wartime diary written in real time.
Oh, yeah.
And how much more insightful it was than any later historical analysis, because it captured the actual feeling of not knowing what would happen next. It highlights that gap between experiencing uncertainty and explaining certainty later.
That's a powerful point. And the third issue?
The overvaluation of facts and experts. We put so much faith in experts, assuming their knowledge of the past gives them a window into the future.
But they're often just good storytellers about what already happened.
Often, yes. And the sources make this slightly uncomfortable point. The smarter someone is, the better they often are at crafting a totally convincing explanation after the event, even if it's wrong.
Wow, so intelligence can actually amplify the bias.
It can provide better tools for rationalization. The author noted even top executives often operate with this belief they know everything, when the reality is deep uncertainty. Recognizing that nobody really knows is crucial for spotting black swans. It requires a certain humility.
That idea of humility, of recognizing what we don't know, that connects to that anti-library concept, right? From Umberto Eco.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic metaphor. Most people see a huge library and think, look how much this person knows.
Look at all the books they've read.
Right. But Eco saw it differently. His library wasn't a trophy case for his knowledge. It was a research tool. The unread books were the important part.
Why the unread ones?
Because they represented the vastness of what he didn't know. They were a constant reminder of the limits of his knowledge, the sheer scale of the unknown.
So it's about valuing the unknown, not just accumulating the known.
Precisely. It's the mindset of an anti-scholar, someone who sees knowledge not as a possession, but as this ongoing journey fueled by skepticism. The danger is treasuring what you know and ignoring the ocean of the unknown. Embracing the anti-library fosters that intellectual humility we need.
Okay, so we have these general tendencies, but the sources also dig into specific cognitive biases, these mental shortcuts that blind us repeatedly.
Oh yes, several really critical ones. The first is the narrative fallacy.
Our love of story.
Our compulsion for stories. Our brains crave coherence. We automatically try to link facts together, find causes, create a narrative arc, even when events are completely random.
It makes the world feel less chaotic, I guess.
It does. It's apparently even tied to brain chemistry, like dopamine rewarding pattern finding. Random data is hard to process, so we compress it into stories. But in doing so, we smooth out the randomness. We ignore the outliers.
The black swans that don't fit the neat story.
Exactly. And memory plays into this too. We constantly revise our past memories to fit a more coherent narrative as new information comes in, making the past seem much more logical and predictable than it felt at the time.
That's kind of scary. It leads right into the next one, doesn't it? Confirmation bias.
It does. This is our tendency to actively seek out information that confirms what we already believe, and to ignore or dismiss anything that challenges it.
We look for the evidence that proves us right.
We do.
Yeah.
And the example the sources use is stark, almost brutal. The turkey problem.
Ah, yes, the turkey.
The turkey gets fed every single day by the farmer. Every day reinforces its belief. Humans are kind, life is good and predictable. Its confidence grows with each feeding.
More confirmation.
Loads of it. Until Thanksgiving arrives.
The entire belief system is catastrophically invalidated.
In an instant.
Yeah.
It perfectly illustrates that just because something hasn't happened yet, the negative black swan, doesn't mean it won't. The evidence of absence, no disaster today, is not the absence of evidence. Disaster is impossible.
That's the round-trip fallacy they mention, confusing those two things.
Precisely. As Karl Popper argued, you can never truly prove all swans are white just by observing white swans. But one black swan instantly disproves it. We need to look for the disconfirming evidence, not just the confirming kind, especially in our complex modern world, this extremistan.
Okay, next bias. Silent evidence. This one really made me pause.
It's powerful, isn't it? The idea that we only see the winners, the survivors. History is written by those who live to tell the tale.
We hear the stories of the shipwreck survivors who prayed and made it.
But we don't hear from the thousands who prayed just as hard and drowned. Their evidence is silent, lost to the sea.
And this applies everywhere. Business, science.
Everywhere. Failed businesses disappear. Unsuccessful inventions are forgotten. Criminals who never get caught don't end up in criminology studies. We see the successes and build theories based on them, completely ignoring the massive graveyard of failures that might tell a different story.
It massively inflates the role of skill and underestimates the role of pure luck or randomness.
Hugely. Understanding silent evidence makes you incredibly cautious about drawing conclusions solely from success stories. You start asking, what am I not seeing here?
Okay, what about the ludic fallacy? Ludics meaning related to games.
Yes, exactly. This is our tendency to treat real-life uncertainty as if it were a well-defined game, like dice or cards in a casino, where the rules and probabilities are known and contained.
We apply casino logic to the real world.
We do. We think because we can calculate the odds of rolling a 7, we can somehow calculate the odds of the next market crash or geopolitical upheaval with similar precision.
But real-world risks aren't like dice rolls.
Not even close. The sources point out that even casinos, the masters of calculated risk, suffer their biggest losses, not from gamblers beating the odds, but from things completely outside their models. An employee embezzlement scheme, a fire, a performer getting injured.
Their own black swans.
Exactly. Our education often reinforces this fallacy, teaching elegant mathematical models that work in simplified ludic environments, but fail spectacularly in the face of real-world unknown unknowns. We get drawn to the tangible risks we think we can measure and ignore the abstract, unquantifiable ones that can actually sink us.
Which is why truly revolutionary inventions like the laser or the internet weren't really planned outcomes.
Right. They were often accidental discoveries, positive black swans emerging from exploration, not from following a predictable game plan.
And that leads to the last bias, tunneling, or the planning fallacy.
Yes. This is all about how, when we plan something, say a big project, we focus intensely on the steps within the plan, the tasks, the resources, the internal deadlines.
We build the perfect Gantt chart.
Right. But we systematically neglect or underestimate everything outside the plan. The potential external disruptions, the unforeseen problems, the shifting context, we tunnel our vision.
The Sydney Opera House example is classic here, isn't it?
Textbook case. Budgeted at $7 million, supposed to take a few years.
Ends up costing over $100 million and taking more than a decade.
Exactly. Why? Because of all the unforeseen issues. Design changes, engineering hurdles, political issues, things completely outside that initial optimistic plan. This happens all the time with large projects, personal plans, government initiatives.
We just don't factor in the potential for massive external disruption.
We don't. We convince ourselves this time it's different. Or we explain away past failures. And modern tools like spreadsheets can actually make this worse, anchoring us to specific numbers and projections that might be based on flawed tunnel vision assumptions. Here we fail to account for the inherent error rate in forecasting itself.
Okay, so we've got these biases blinding us, but the sources say the type of randomness we're dealing with also matters hugely. This is where mediocristan and extremistan come in.
Yes, this is a really fundamental distinction. These are like two different universes operating under completely different rules of randomness and impact. Understanding which world you're in is critical.
So what defines mediocristan?
Mediocristan is the realm of the average, the typical. Think about physical human characteristics like height or weight. You can have outliers, a very tall person, a very heavy person, but one single extreme individual doesn't dramatically change the average height or weight of the entire population.
The total isn't dominated by one single instance.
Exactly. Extremes exist, but their impact on the total or the average is negligible. Things cluster around the mean. The bell curve, the Gaussian distribution works pretty well here. Calorie intake, running speed for typical joggers, things with natural limits often fall into mediocristan.
Okay, makes sense. So extremistan must be the opposite.
Completely the opposite. Extremistan is where the wild stuff happens. Here, a single event, a single data point, a single individual can utterly dominate the total or average. The average becomes almost meaningless, or at least highly misleading.
This is where black swans live.
This is their natural habitat. Think about wealth distribution. A handful of billionaires can have more wealth than millions or even billions of other people combined. One Jeff Bezos or Elon Musk totally skews the average wealth calculation.
Right. Or book sales. One J.K. Rowling sells more than almost everyone else put together.
Exactly. Or website traffic, citations of scientific papers, the severity of earthquakes, market returns. In extremistan, one observation can change everything. Knowledge here doesn't grow smoothly. It jumps in huge, unpredictable leaps.
So you can't just rely on past averages to predict the future in extremistan.
Absolutely not. You need constant skepticism. The past is a very poor guide because the next outlier could rewrite the entire picture. Black swans are, by definition, features of extremistan. Their impact is extreme precisely because the system allows for such massive deviations.
And this distinction, mediocristan versus extremistan, it has huge implications for things like careers, right? The sources talk about scalable versus non-scalable professions.
Yes, this is a direct consequence. A non-scalable profession is typically rooted in mediocristan. Think of a dentist, a baker, a massage therapist.
Your income is tied directly to your time and effort. You have to be there doing the work.
Right. You trade time for money. There's a physical limit to how many patients you can see or loaves you can bake in a day. So income differences exist, but they tend to be within a certain range. You don't usually find one dentist earning billions while others earn minimum wage. It's more constrained.
Okay, so scalable professions must be an extremistan.
Definitely. Think of a writer, a musician, an actor, a software developer, a financial trader. Here, you can decouple your effort from the outcome, at least after the initial creation.
You write the book once, but it can sell millions of copies. You create the software once, it gets downloaded globally.
Exactly. You can reach a massive audience with little or no additional effort per unit sold. Your potential income isn't limited by your hours, it's limited by the size of the market and, well, luck. This creates the possibility for extreme inequality. The winner-take-all effect. Precisely. A few superstars can capture almost all the rewards, while countless others, maybe equally talented, struggle to make anything. This became really obvious with technologies like recording and printing. Suddenly, one opera singer could dominate the market through recordings, whereas before, many local singers could make a living.
It concentrates success dramatically.
It does. It's an inherent feature of any domain where replication and distribution are easy and cheap. It breeds that extremistan inequality.
But the sources also mention the internet changing this slightly with the long tail.
Right, the long tail is an interesting wrinkle. The internet allows niche players to find niche audiences globally. So you have many more small players who can survive, maybe even thrive, in their specific corner. An indie band can find fans worldwide. An obscure author can self-publish.
So it democratizes things a bit.
It creates more opportunities at the lower end, yes. But the sources caution that it doesn't eliminate the winner-take-all dynamic at the top. The top might still be incredibly concentrated, but who gets to the top can change much faster.
Because someone can emerge from that long tail unexpectedly. A viral hit.
Exactly. The internet increases the potential for positive black swans of success emerging from obscurity. It makes the top position less secure, more volatile. So inequality persists, but the names might shuffle more quickly. It enables more experimentation, which is key for encountering those beneficial surprises.
Okay, so we live in a world with these two domains, and Extremistan is where the big, unpredictable stuff happens. But our main tool for thinking about randomness, the bell curve, you're saying it's basically useless or even dangerous there.
The sources are pretty scathing about it, honestly. The bell curve, the Gaussian distribution, it's taught everywhere. It underpins so much of statistics, finance, even social sciences. It was even on the old German 10-mark note.
It feels like the bedrock of statistics.
It is for mediocristan. It beautifully describes phenomena where things cluster tightly around the average and extreme events are incredibly rare, becoming exponentially less likely the further you go from the center. Think heights. Again, the probability of someone being 20 feet tall is effectively zero under a bell curve.
It provides a sense of predictability, of boundaries.
Exactly. But apply it to Extremistan, to financial markets, wealth, casualties in war, book sales, and it becomes, as the sources put it, a great intellectual fraud. It dramatically underestimates the probability and impact of extreme events.
It lops off the fat tails, the possibility of those massive outliers.
Precisely. It gives you a false sense of safety, making black swans seem mathematically impossible when they are, in fact, an inherent feature of this system. It blinds you to the real risks.
And this isn't just a theoretical problem, right? It has real historical roots in how it was applied. You mentioned Quetelet.
Yes. Adolphe Quetelet, back in the 19th century, he took the bell curve, which was developed for errors in astronomical measurement, and applied it to social data, creating the concept of the average man, l'homme moyen.
Okay.
But he went further, suggesting this average was somehow the ideal, the norm, and that deviations from it were errors or pathologies. It promoted conformity and discouraged the very extremes, the innovators, the outliers that actually drive progress.
So a statistical tool became a tool for social judgment.
A dangerous one, yeah. It embedded this idea of predictable normalcy deep into social thinking, pushing aside the reality of unpredictable variation.
And this flawed thinking unbelievably made its way into the highest levels of finance and economics, even Nobel Prize winners.
Shockingly, yes. The sources specifically call out Nobel laureates like Markowitz and Sharpe, the architects of modern portfolio theory. Their models, which are still hugely influential in how pensions and investments are managed,
Are based on the bell curve, on assuming financial markets behave like mediocristan.
fundamentally, yes. They assume price movements follow this mild Gaussian randomness. They prioritize mathematical elegance and tractability over empirical reality. They built these complex theories assuming tame randomness in a world that's actually incredibly wild.
Even though markets clearly experience crashes and booms that are way outside bell curve predictions.
Constantly. The models fail spectacularly during crises, precisely when you need them most. But the inertia is huge. The sources describe the author challenging these laureates directly.
Yeah, you mentioned that anecdote, asking them how their models handle real-world shocks.
Right, and finding they often retreated into the math, unable to give practical answers, almost disconnected from the messy reality their models were supposed to describe.
So the whole financial industry, MBA programs, even government regulations are often built on this shaky foundation.
Largely, yes. Using terms like sigma and variance derived from Gaussian math gives this illusion of control, this false precision. But it systematically ignores the possibility of the truly massive event that can wipe everything out. It's like designing buildings for mild tremors when you live on a major fault line.
Wow. Okay, so if the bell curve is out for Extremistan, what should we be using? The sources brought up Benoit Mandelbrot and fractals.
Yes, Mandelbrot is presented as a true visionary, someone who saw the flaws in the traditional models decades ago and offered a different way of looking at randomness.
Fractals. I think of those intricate repeating patterns like snowflakes or coastlines.
Exactly. Mandelbrot realized that nature and many complex systems aren't smooth and predictable like the circles and triangles of classical geometry. They're rough, jagged, irregular. but crucially, they often exhibit self-similarity.
Meaning a small part looks kind of like the whole thing. A branch looks like a mini tree.
Precisely. A coastline's jaggedness looks similar whether you zoom in or out. Clouds aren't perfect spheres. Mountains aren't perfect cones. Mandelbrot developed the mathematics to describe this roughness, this fractal geometry.
And how does this apply to randomness and extremistan?
Mandelbrot showed that many phenomena in extremistan, cotton prices, river floods, market returns, wealth distribution follow fractal patterns, or what are often called power laws, rather than bell curves.
The power laws, how are they different?
Unlike bell curves, where extreme events become vanishingly rare, power laws allow for much higher probabilities of extreme events. They have fat tails. They don't tell you when a black swan will hit.
But they acknowledge that such events are mathematically possible, even expected over long periods.
Exactly. They make black swans, gray swans, still unpredictable in timing, but acknowledged as part of the system's fundamental nature. They incorporate the wildness, the potential for massive jumps that the bell curve ignores.
So it's a more realistic way to model these volatile systems.
Much more realistic. It shifts your mindset from expecting stability and being shocked by extremes to expecting variability and understanding that extremes are always possible. Even if you can't predict them precisely, you can be prepared for their potential existence.
It's about embracing the inherent roughness of the world, not trying to smooth it out with flawed models.
Perfectly put, Mandelbrot's work offers a lens that accepts the wildness, rather than pretending it doesn't exist.
Okay, so the world is wilder than our models suggest. Our brains mislead us, experts can be wrong. It sounds a bit bleak. What are we supposed to do about it?
Well, the first step, according to the sources, is a profound philosophical shift. Embracing skepticism and accepting the limits of our knowledge.
Not cynicism, but genuine intellectual humility.
Exactly. Recognizing that certainty is often an illusion, especially in complex domains. Thinkers like Popper, Poincaré, Hayek all emphasize these limits. Hayek's point about central planning is key.
That no single entity can know everything needed to run an economy.
Right? Knowledge is dispersed, fragmented, held by individuals. Complex systems emerge from the bottom up. They aren't designed top down. Trying to predict and control them perfectly is often futile, even dangerous. We need to accept a degree of ignorance.
So the ideal isn't knowing everything, but knowing the limits of what you know, this epistemocrat idea.
Yes, the epistemocrat is someone who is comfortable with doubt, who questions assumptions, including their own, and isn't afraid to say, I don't know. They learn from errors. They understand human fallibility. It's about critical thinking, not accumulating dogma.
Like Montaigne, accepting contradictions and weaknesses as just part of being human.
Precisely. True philosophy, the sources argue, should arise from wrestling with real-world problems and uncertainties, not just abstract debates divorced from reality. It's about developing intellectual self-defense against spurious certainty.
Okay, that's the mindset shift. But are there practical strategies? The sources talked about the barbell strategy.
Yes, this is probably the most concrete piece of actionable advice for navigating extremistan. Imagine a weightlifter's barbell.
Weight at the ends, nothing much in the middle.
Exactly. Apply that to your investments, your career efforts, even your life choices. Put the vast majority of your resources, say 85–90%, into extremely safe, conservative things.
Like cash, government bonds, maybe a very stable, non-scalable job securing basic needs. Things with very limited downside.
Right. Hyper-conservative on one end. Then, take the remaining small portion, 10–15%, and put it into extremely speculative, high-risk, potentially high-reward ventures.
Like investing in very early-stage startups, pursuing a wildly creative project, exploring completely new ideas, things with potentially unlimited upside.
Precisely. The key is the asymmetry. Your maximum loss is capped at that small 10–15% you allocated to speculation. If those ventures fail, it's painful but not catastrophic.
But if one of them hits a positive black swan,
The upside can be enormous, potentially life-changing. It could dwarf any modest gains from the safe side. Think of venture capital. They expect most investments to fail, but hope for one massive success.
and the strategy explicitly avoids the middle ground, like medium-risk investments.
Yes, because that middle ground is often where hidden, unacknowledged black swan risks lurk. Things that seem stable and moderately risky can blow up unexpectedly. The barbell forces you to be either extremely safe or extremely speculative, avoiding that potentially fragile middle.
It's a way to deliberately expose yourself to positive randomness, to serendipity.
Exactly. Many great discoveries, penicillin, the laser, Viagra, were accidental side effects of pursuing something else. The barbell strategy creates room for these happy accidents while protecting your core survival. It systematizes exposure to good luck.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
So the overall message seems to be skeptical, understand your biases, recognize the limits of prediction,
Don't blindly trust experts or models, especially in extremistan.
and structure your life to withstand a negative shocks while being open to positive ones.
Right. It's about cultivating what the sources call a non-commoditized way of thinking, not just following the herd. Except that certainty is usually an error, and that luck and randomness play a huge role.
And the more you expose yourself to new experiences, new people, new ideas,
The higher the chance you'll stumble upon one of those beneficial black swans. It's about increasing your surface area for positive accidents to occur. Embrace trial and error, especially small errors you can recover from. Hashtag outro.
wow. Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. We've dived deep into black swans, these rare, massive impact events that we only seem to understand in hindsight.
We learned we're pretty bad at predicting them thanks to biases like the narrative fallacy, confirmation bias, silent evidence, the ludic fallacy, all sorts of mental traps.
And our main tool, the bell curve, is often completely wrong for the job, especially in the wild world of extremistan, which governs so much of modern life, from finance to fame.
But it's not hopeless. We can adopt a mindset of skepticism and intellectual humility. And we have strategies like the robust barbell strategy to protect ourselves from the bad surprises and maybe even catch some of the good ones.
Definitely. And the sources leave us with this one final, really provocative thought. It's simple, almost mundane advice, but it sticks with you. Never run to catch a train.
Ah, yes. It sounds trivial, doesn't it? But think about the psychology.
Right. If you calmly walk to the station and miss the train, okay, annoying, but no big deal. You wait for the next one. Minimal regret.
But if you sprint, heart pounding, push people out of the way, give it absolutely everything,
Yeah.
and the doors close in your face.
The regret is intense, the frustration, the feeling of wasted effort, the self-recrimination. It's awful.
So the advice isn't really about trains. It's about detaching your emotional state from outcomes dictated by external pressures or arbitrary schedules.
What if you applied that to everything society pushes you to chase? Promotions, deadlines, keeping up with the Joneses. What if you stopped running for their trains?
What if you set your own pace, your own standards,
Yeah.
decided what you actually needed and valued, rather than constantly reacting to external expectations? It shifts the focus from avoiding small failures or embarrassments.
To cultivating internal autonomy. It's about not letting the fear of missing out, dictated by others, control your actions and your peace of mind.
Exactly. It's about building a life that's robust to those small, everyday stresses and disappointments, freeing up your energy and attention for the things that truly matter, and perhaps making you more open to recognizing real, meaningful opportunities when they arise unexpectedly. Not chasing, but being ready.
Building a life where you control your own definition of success and failure. That is a truly liberating thought to end on.
We hope this deep dive has given you some powerful tools and a new perspective on navigating our uncertain world.
Absolutely. Keep exploring, stay curious, and embrace the unexpected. Until next time on The Deep Dive.